really wanted to acknowledge Tammy on here because she is an absolute whiz at PowerPoint and a lot about making pretty images. I wanted to do a module on the monad because I thought it was basically really timely since we are going through Starburst reset that is a very high-level monadic reset process. And the monad is the aspect of our multidimensional self that holds our direct connection to Source. The monad is in lots of different places in our anatomy, but wherever it is it's at the center of that particular structure. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different locations for the monad. It holds our capacity to manifest and our capacity for two-way communication between us and Source, and our capacity to regain eternal life. And I'd just like to remind you, in terms of thinking about reality as formed by the flow of consciousness through a template that is also made of consciousness. So you can essentially think of consciousness kind of splitting itself up in two ways. In one sense as a crystallized template that holds the form and the blueprint for manifestation, and also as the consciousness that flows through it, that beams through it, and that brings that manifestation template to life. The seed atom is the core template, and the monad is the flames that activate and bring that template to life. But they're really just two aspects of the essence. Now, I'm not used to holding a mic, so if I start to, wave it around or hold it too far away, give me a heads up. Going to the next one. I just wanted you to have a quick look at where I pulled information from for this. We started out with tangible structure of the soul. Evolutionary Path of Human Consciousness. The Templar Manual was very helpful. The Egypt lectures, Awakening the Flame of Orion. The Dance for Love, especially the workshop that was in Greece 2002, and the Dance for Life, Dance for Love. I have a whole other page of these, so you can go to the next one. I listened to a lot of workshops. The Forbidden Testaments of Revelation, the Cosmic Clock. And so Dublin 2003, and then you'll also see Dublin November 2003. The Resetting the Cosmic Clock, Cathara's 2-3 Foundations, and the Michael Maryline Workshop, and all the way up to Phoenix in March of this year. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. And one thing that you're going to notice a bunch as we go through this is that there are lots of aspects of this creation that are pretty paradoxical. And I think that's probably because we're looking at it from a limited three-dimensional perspective. And when you're looking at it probably from a multi-dimensional perspective, it will not seem so paradoxical. But there's lots of places where what is inside and what's outside, what's big and what's small, are going to be placed in a way that seems like the opposite to the way that makes sense to you. So we're going to actually start with that right with the unified, because all creation takes place within the unified field of the unified, which is known as the point of all union, and it is a point. It is a singular point of consciousness within the body of Source. So everything is taking place within a single point, which is pretty strange, but that's the way it is. I didn't make the rules. We're going to talk about stair-step creation a bit.
Terry, can you just up the volume a little bit?
Yeah.
You can, because there's a lot of background noise.
Okay, I'm going to do my best. It weighs about 5 pounds. All right, so we're going to start with the ascended mastery levels of creation and identity. Consciousness at this level is considered ultra-terrestrial. And these are layers of consciousness that are eternal gestalts, that are basically enormous collective consciousness. It's like collective and unified at the same time. And they take the form of concentric spheres. The very first step down from Source itself is called the God seed. And that is an electrotonal gestalt of pure conscious radiation within the Unus I. There are many God seeds. And they're very specific that they're formed in 2 sets of 12 in relation to the cosmic order in which we exist. That implies that there might be a whole other set of creations out there somewhere based on a different pattern. But we're not going to think about those. That first one, I just want to mention that that's also called the Uset level of identity. Also the I am this I am. Now our second step is the monad. This is the original monad, the big monad. And these are called the cosmic family gestalts of consciousness. These are created in sets of 12 as well. When we get into some detail about monad, we will see why the pattern of 12. The monad creates within itself a trinity of vibrating light and sound that forms the template, the morphogenetic field, for the energy matrices. It creates sets of 12 energy matrices, and each of those has time matrices inside of them. The energy matrix is a standing field of inaudible sound, one primary resonant tone, that's the particle I, and 2 secondary tones, the particle and the particle K. And these take the form of concentric spherical domains of sound. They're called domains because they are eternal and fixed. They do not change. And consciousness at this level takes the form called the Janus, meaning of the Unus I. The third step down is called the Ekar, or the Ecadic level, and this level is known as the Grande Janus. This is the resonant tone, and it's the first individuation from the monad. This is a singular vibration of what's called first cause sound. It's also called the monadic wave. The Ekar then creates 12 riche within itself. This is the polaric level of the energy matrix. This is the overtone and the high vibration. This is called the Vacha Janus, and this is a bipolar vibration. It has 2 core vibrations in it. The next step down is creating what's called geomantic entities. This is the triadic level of the energy matrix, the Ramyanas. This is the bass tone low vibration, and this one is tripolar. It has 3 vibrations within it. So as we're going through these different steps of the energy matrix, we're going farther and farther out from the Unus I, from the central source. Now this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. Each geomantic entity polarizes itself to form a set of 2 15-dimensional time matrices. So each energy matrix has 2 time matrices inside of it. And it starts with a point of frequency that represents the central point of the 15 dimensions. That's going to be the 8th dimension grid. And then it fragments itself outward from that into 2 sets of 7 dimensions. The 7 higher dimensions and the 7 lower dimensions. So these plus the original 8th dimension make the 15 dimensions. The 2 time matrices are interwoven together. So they are separate, but their energy flows into and through each other. And these create the basis for 5 harmonic particle universes and 5 harmonic antiparticle universes. So it's really important that I think we normally think about emphasizing the aspect of the step downs where it's like starting with dimension 12 or dimension 15, consciousness breaks itself down into smaller and smaller and smaller forms, starting with the larger number of dimensions and down into the smaller number of dimensions. But the way the form is actually set, it starts from the center and spreads itself out. Okay. After the pattern for the 2 time matrices is set, that same geomantic entity that put itself through that 8th dimension and created the whole 15-dimensional pattern, then projects parts of its own identity into the dimensional grids of dimensions 13, 14, and 15 to form the light fields. This is the Rishi level of awareness. They're called Brenau Rishi, which means of the light. And the dimension 13 is the most important of these because that holds the blue flame that is the direct connection to the ecadic matrix, which is the first step down from the monad. So it holds the pathway out of the time matrix and out of the energy matrix into the monad and God seed level. Then the Rishi creates sets of 12 in dimensions 12, 11, and 10, so it creates 12 avatars. Each avatar creates 12 oversouls. Each oversoul creates 12 souls. Each soul creates 12 incarnates. It's a lot of names. We're going to take a little look at Huva bodies. Huva bodies are 3-dimensional constructs that hold consciousness into one of the harmonic universes. In the time matrix, the Huva bodies are called Ariya Huva bodies, and the ones in the energy matrix are called Useta Huva bodies. And together, they form the 8 Huva bodies that is the monad. So when we're talking about the consciousness of the monad, I want you to appreciate how enormous that is. It holds the entire 8 Huva bodies of that entire structure. And these are the 8 Huva bodies of the monad. We are in the Nada Huva body as incarnates. This is also called the Tauran level, and this is carbon-based biology. The Alphi Huva body is the soul, or Dora, and that is carbon-silica-based biology. The Beta Huva body is the oversoul, or the Tura, that is silica-based biology. Mahara Huva body is the avatar, also called the Dolus. That is crystalline liquid light. Raja Huva body corresponds to the Rishi level, the light fields, and the body form there is a standing wave flame body. And then the Tanotra Huva body, the Di Omni Huva body, and the Prima Huva body are all pure radiation. They are the Huva bodies that are in the energy matrix, and those are really outside of manifestation per se.
Is that the God seed?
No, that's actually below the God seed. There's the God seed, then the monad, and then the energy matrix. So this is just for you to take a look at that whole thing. Let me see. When I was taking a look at this, I was doing a little bit of a calculation, and I don't seem to have it written down here, but I was trying to get a sense of just how enormous a monad actually is in terms of consciousness, and did the calculation that because a monad forms 12 Ekar, then 12 Rishi, 12 geomantic entities, which each form 2 time matrices, one monad makes 3,456 time matrices. Okay? And if we're considering that, a few levels below that, a single avatar creates 1,728 incarnates in one time matrix. My calculator ran out of memory way before I could get to that. And so just say it's like billions of us make up a monad. That's how huge the monad is. So the densest forms, the smallest forms are at the center of this, so we as incarnates are at the center, and then as we expand our identities out, we expand into these larger and larger structures. Now this is the human lineage through all these levels. We do not have a name for the monadic level of the human lineage. And I certainly looked, and it doesn't seem to have been given. But the name for the God seed that the human line is based on, that we originally came out of, is the Melchizedek God seed. The FR level for human lineage is called the Ra Confederacy. The Riche is the Emerald Order. So everybody's going to be really familiar with these different names. Geomantic entity level that creates the time matrices is the Azurite Council. The Rishi level is the Elohai. Our avatar level are the Anahazi. Our oversoul level is the Oraphim. Our soul level is the Turanusium. And the incarnate is the Turanusium too. So that is the pattern that we need to follow as humans in terms of our pathway of ascension out of the time matrix into the monadic and into the God seed levels. We have to retrace that exact lineage. I want you to go back for just a second.
Go back.
Yeah, please.
I tried to hold it. I just wanted to make a comment about the Melchizedek God seed briefly. Remembering that everything is based on patterns of 12, and that the God seeds also come in sets of 12. And everyone, I hope, will remember that the number 12 out of every single pattern holds the complete blueprint for that pattern and is itself the largest pattern. The Melchizedek God seed holds the number 12 position in its set of God seeds, and it's called a prima God seed for that reason. The Melchizedek God seed is one of the few that has been able to keep what's called the pillar of light, that is the pillar of consciousness that connects every single one of these levels to each other. It's one of the few that's been able to keep that pillar continuous and unbroken through most of its family lines, the lines that come out of the Melchizedek God seed. And because of that, it is called the keeper of the codes, and it has become involved in many, many situations called host matrix transplants, which is essentially a situation where any family line that is having difficulty with its pillar of consciousness can be spliced into the Melchizedek God seed, and by doing that, it's connected with its own original monad in God seed, and also to the larger power of the Melchizedek one to hold that intact. So that can realign the higher levels of the pillar. And that is what Melchizedek cloister ordination is. That's what that does, is it splices everybody into the Melchizedek God seed, regardless of whether or not that is the God seed that your original family of consciousness came out of. It doesn't matter. It's going to help you realign no matter what family you're from. Okay? And humans, as descendants of the Melchizedek God seed, have actually served as host matrix transplant vessels for lots of different interstellar races. Yeah. Okay, this diagram is just a different way to look at what we've seen. And seeing that we've got a 2 Cathara grid system in terms of the manifestation fields, the density fields, the light fields, and the sound fields. And that takes the form of 2 Cathara grids, one for the densities and one for the primal fields, the light and sound fields. So this 2 Cathara grid system, 24 points of consciousness, 2 sets of 12, is the pattern of the monad. And this entire 2 Cathara grid set is a monad. We can also just note here that the Akasha is the capstone code for this construct of consciousness. And the Akasha is the Veka code that essentially opens the gateways into the monadic level. That's partly why the Akasha is so important. Okay, just remembering that the monad is the 8 Huva bodies and it's also the dimension 8 center point. And you can see this in terms of the Merkaba structure for the time matrix. The way that it works is harmonic universe 1 has 1 Merkaba spiral, and it needs to link with one of the other harmonic universes to complete its Merkaba. So there are 4 of these harmonic universes that only have 1 Merkaba spiral, but the central one, dimensions 8, 9, and 7, 8, and 9, has 2 spirals. That is the center point for the time matrix, and it is the point of entry for all consciousness that manifests into a time matrix, and for everything that is leaving. So even when you are complete with your ascension out of the time matrix, and you can go as consciousness into the energy matrix fields, if you want to leave that system, you have to step back down to the dimension 8 center point to leave this set of systems. So you can't go out through the hepatic top part of it. You have to come back into the center point. So everything comes in and leaves through that center point. The dimension 8 point is really important too because it connects with a bunch of other time matrices. So it's a place where there tends to be very, very high security in a time matrix. And if there's problems in a time matrix, that portal, that pathway is heavily guarded to make sure that anything that's having a hard time can't get out to make another place have a hard time. All right, now we're going to start with looking at the details of the way the monad is structured. And the Parnakai is really interesting because it has 2 forms. When it is in its state of division into the Particum and the Particate, it takes the form of a resonant tone. So the Partakai is the resonant tone, the Particum is the bass tone, low tone, the Particate is the overtone, high tone. The resonant tone is right in the middle. But when it's in its flash-off state, and the Particum and the Particate have reunited with it, it takes the form of what's called an interdimensional tritone wave. So it actually spans levels. And when I'm looking at this dynamic, because the Particum and the Particate are only half the size, the template is only half the size of the Partakai, it's like they are automatically dropping down a level in consciousness. They're smaller. They're only half as big as a Partakai. So just by flashing on, you are kind of dropping down in frequency, dropping down a level. That starts to set the pattern for the dimensions. And when you're flashing off, it's like you're pulling in, but you're also pulling up. Going up a level, and then you're also pulling in and contracting. Now this is just serving as a reminder to everyone in terms of the stairway to heaven. Where we are. And we're actually going to go off the top of the stairway to heaven. So we're here. This is, yep, and we're going up the stairway. This is our Particum universe, our Particum light fields. This is our Eka-Veka system, the 4 quadrants, the Veka and the Eka in the center, then moving up to the Akasha level, 4 Akasha and in Akasha A, and 4 Akasha A and in Akasha Aya, right here. And we're going to start to take a look at what happens before we even get to the top of the stairway to heaven. Now, this is a representation of the very beginning of creation. And think of this. Okay. Think of this circle that represents source as representing a consciousness that is absolutely eternal and infinite and limitless in every way. There's no end to its consciousness. And that within that limitless, vast body of source, a creation point emerged out of the desire to create. And that represents the very first Partakai number 1 that is here. The center point of Partakai number 1 is the Uniside. And everything that is manifest is inside of that single point, inside of Partakai number 1. So we're not only inside the first Partakai, we're all the way inside the center point of the Partakai. Then you can say that it's as if Source observed itself, saw itself reflected in that first Partakai, and it saw its own nature, its own essence, by observing itself in that form, and wanted to create more of them. So the second Partakai emerged as a consequence of that, and Partakai number 2 contains not only the desire to create, but the intention to create. And the pattern for all of creation is held within both of these Partakai in the form of encryption, that is a set of vibrations. And that set of vibrations sets the template, the pattern, and the entire method by which consciousness can enter form. It contains what's called the Christ code. That's the pattern through which consciousness creates. And we start to get a very interesting, unusual dynamic here. What happens is that the Partakai number 2 is not really created separately from this. Partakai number 2 comes out through the center point of Partakai number 1. Okay? So think of Partakai number 1 as having 360 degrees of thrust or force or consciousness. And Partakai number 2 is just like it and has even more because it also has the intention. It also has 360 degrees. So when it pops out through this central point, what it does is the way that it comes out splits Partakai number 1 into Partakai and Partakai. So it's like Partakai number 1 becomes these two. It takes the place of this bipolar pair. Partakai 2 takes the position or place of Partakai number 1. And when these rejoin back together and go into the central point, Partakai number 1 flows back into Partakai number 2. When Partakai 2 comes out through the center point of Partakai 1, it leaves behind it a little space or a little void in the body of Source. And Source fills up that void with its own essence. So that the way that you've got it is that Source in its limitlessness is always flowing through into the manifestation. And every time there is an outward phasing, Source is filling up the space that's left behind. So as more and more and more of these units are created, Source is flowing out and flowing out and flowing out, and it's the actual essence of Source that is forming all of these units of consciousness. And there is a two-way flow back and forth between the creation that's inside this point and the eternal and limitless body of Source itself. So it goes back and forth, and it is never disconnected. What also happens is that it's called Manu exchange. That is the Manu force, the Source consciousness itself flows back and forth. It also buffers the reunion of Partakam and Partake, because since those are opposite charge, opposite identity, they need to have a Manu flow around them, or they would annihilate each other when they rejoin. They would cancel each other out. So if they don't cancel each other out, they recombine together. And that happens via the Manu force. So this whole unit right here is called a triad. And that is basically what's called the first phaser pair. It is the first point of this entire creation. And it's actually eternally happening anew every single instant. Now, there are a whole number of other steps in between the first triad and the monad that I can't tell you about because I don't know them all yet. That information was initially released in Morocco, and it's still really being clarified. So if we're really lucky, we'll hear about it this weekend. Really nice. But I do know that there are steps in there called the dyad, the biad, and the myad, and that the dyad is formed of two of the triads. Next one. So up there in the corner, we've got a representation of that very first triad, the Manu, the Ire, and the Mane. And this is the monad. Now the monad has 4 of these triads, plus it also has one in the center. It's like there's a center point, but it's actually a triad. And these exist at different angles to each other. And so the central consciousness, the force, the energy flows out through this central point and into these. So this is the basic form of the monad wherever we're going to find it. This is the original form of it. And you can see how similar it is to the Ruche pattern. It's almost identical to the Ruche. The Ruche and the monad at this level, I'm not quite sure if they're formed separately or if they're like 2 aspects of a single creation process. But the monad then creates the Kristalla and the Christ. So the monad is the consciousness construct that is closest to the very creation of the top level of the stairway to heaven. The monad first creates the crystalla, and then it creates the crest. It's the photogenerator, so it generates the light, the flames, the consciousness that create the balls of light that are known as radons and also iridons. So the iridons are the cells that go with the crystalla, and the radons are the cells that go with the crest. But they're all created by the process of the monad. This is the way the ruche gets formed. The way that the ruche occurs is that out of the central point, the 12 and the 6 point are formed simultaneously. The 6 then creates the 9 and the 12 creates the 3. And then each of those polarize and form a Manet and Ire cell. These are essentially all Manu equivalent. So even it's a really interesting dynamic, and we're going to see this pattern in a bunch of different places, that this is the usual way that we understand polarization, that a Manu or a Partakai splits itself into Ire and Manet, or Particum and Partakai. But this is also, in a sense, a form of polarization. The 12 and the 6 both hold the entire pattern of the unit of 12, but the 12 is expanding and the 6 is contracting. So I know that Ashana has talked about in some places what's called dominant and recessive charges, and I don't know if that is exactly how you would characterize this, but you might think of it as, in a sense, this is like a Manet Manu, and this is like an Ire Manu, and these also have the opposite, the exact same dynamic, they're opposite to each other. Okay. This is a diagram that we don't see much, but I think it's really important. This is called the 7 higher and lower heavens that are formed by the primal 12 domains and the 15 rays of the time matrix. The 12 domains and the 15 rays together form a monad. The 12 domains are the sound and light fields, and the 15 rays are the light fields and the manifestation fields. So already you probably have noticed that the light fields function both as domains and as rays. They're like a transitional kind of state. The light fields are domains in the sense that they are eternal and they're mostly fixed, but they are starting to flash on and off a little bit, like the manifestation realms do. So they're also considered rays. So they're kind of a halfway point. And in the sound and light fields, we have 3 domains and then 3 parallel domains, and they are all inside of density 5, dimension 13. So again, this is a little bit reverse of how we think about it when we're looking at that other diagram where the ecstatic fields are on the outside and the light fields are an inner layer. We can tend to think of it as though the ecstatic fields are bigger, the sound fields are bigger than the light fields, but actually they're smaller. So the closer you get to source, the more you are contracting into a point. And the farther out you get towards manifestation, the larger the template gets, up to this center point, which is kind of like the interface between these two. And at that point, you get the reverse. You go farther and farther out in manifestation, and you get smaller and smaller and smaller again. So it's like here, what we've got is the 7 lower heavens. We've got 3 harmonic universes and 3 parallel harmonic universes, all inside of the density 4, dimension 12 blueprint, which holds the parallel and R blueprint. So the density 4 blueprint is the big one, and then the forms get smaller and smaller and smaller as you go farther out into the densities. So that the 2 really big templates are the biggest manifestation template, dimension 12, and the biggest primal light sound template is dimension 13. So some really interesting things happen right in the middle there.
I think we're actually going to skip that one and go on to the next one.
So there's what's called a D13 trivecca point and a D12 bivecca point. So this is the 7th lower heaven, dimension 12. We've got the D13, what's called the D13 Manu connection point. Remember, the dimension 13 is the equivalent of the Manu force in the light field. It's the blue flame. And the Manu connection here, the dimension 12 divine blueprint. And they are both Manu, but even though they're both Manu, they essentially form a bipolar phasing unit. And the same with this point. This is like 3 Manu forces phasing together. And the 3rd point is where all 14 of the heavens connect to the cosmic Akasha Manu, God's spirit womb point, right through the very center point. So the more that I looked at this, the more it seemed to me that it's kind of like you can consider that interface between dimension 13 and dimension 12 as like the functional center of all creation, that everything really moves out from that in terms of when you're talking about the time matrices and everything that is manifest. And actually, in terms of the Eka-Veka, that is the point where we connect into the Eka. So it's true structurally in that sense as well. Okay. So I just wanted you to have a look at 2 different ways to take a look at the primal light fields. That you could say that they are a phasing triad, and that when you look at it this way, it really looks like these 2 are partially external to the Partakai. But that really isn't the way that it is, because everything happens within that same Partakai. So it's more accurate to say that they're internally isolated within the wholeness of the Partakai unit. And that shows that. And then we have another one of those paradoxical things here, because the light fields are polarized or smaller translations of the Akkadic sound fields. So here we have an Akkadic sound field, and we have the Particoma and the Partic dimension 13 blueprints, which are polarized. And yet, we just saw with that other one that the primal 13 is taken as a single blueprint, and that this is a smaller one inside of that. And the same for these 2. So we get an awful lot of that big things inside little things. And just to note that every single one of the harmonic universes plus the tissue capsule of the radial body form this structure where you have the inner Miage field or the ERA form that pulls inward, and the trion Manet expands outward, and then around that is a rayon or Manu still point resonant void field. So that's essentially just another way to look at that phasing triad. Now the radial body is really important because it is the levels of the radial body itself that merge to form the flame body. So every single thing that we do with flame body happens in the radial body field. The radial body surrounds the Hoover body, and what's called the holographic crystal body, which is another word for the monadic body, manifest in the rayon void field of the radial body. So this is where we're going to get all the crystal body structures. So everything in Kathara 2 and 3 that they're talking about crystal body happens in the rayon field levels. And that's where the diotic meiotic grid is, where the particum and the particate universes connect with and flow into and through each other. So that field here is extremely important, and this is just a little diagram of the basic crystal body template. When all of these radial bodies merge, all the different levels of the Hoover bodies merge, you get an Akasha flame body with an upward pointing shape. That's based on the Eros field. And these are the levels of flame body activation that we get. At the very center here, before we even get to the Eka Amareya flame body, we've got a 30-dimensional Veka flame body that has to be activated before you can expand out into this level. And there's the Akasha flame body, the Akasha A, and the Akasha A Amareya flame bodies. The Veka codes that open the body into those different levels are on this side, the Eka codes, the Scepter codes, the Templar Boucher codes, and the Christ codes. So the radial body and the flame body are the levels that we're opening into. When we open those, we open into the monad. So here we're getting our very first Eros flame activation in Harmonic Universe 1. We've got the densities 1 and 2 flame body, the densities 3 and 4. And in order for the full density 3-4, you have to also activate the parallel density 3-4 to get this full flame body. You can access the density 5. And you start to get into the Eka flame body activation at density 6, which is here. I just want to mention here that it's a little bit complicated that we know that we start to connect with the Eka body itself at density 6. But we also know that the Eka, in a certain sense, exists only half a dimensional level above where we are here. So, for example, we have Earth, parallel Earth, and inner Earth, which is the Eka Earth. Parallel Earth is one dimension above us in frequency, and inner Earth is half a dimension above us in frequency. It's right in between. So it seems kind of strange that, shall we say, the Eka is as close as half a dimension away from us. Why do we have to go all the way up to density level 6 before we can get into the Eka? And it's because it is based on a template that is twice as big as our template here. We have a Particum template, and then there's the Particay template. Together, if you put those together, you're approaching the ECA template size, which is twice as big as us, and which is based on a flame level that is much stronger than our flame level. So even though it starts only half a dimensional step away from us, in order to get there, you have to fully assemble 2 time matrices of consciousness to get into it. So it's like you pull all this up and go all the way up here, and then you kind of drop back down into the actual ECA. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is the ECA-VECA map, and this is the VECA monad. And you will probably notice just by looking at this that the forms of these 2 things are really similar to each other. And what we've got is one triad for each one of the quadrants of the VECA. So you could say each whole 12-tree Pythagora grid of each VECA quadrant, each primal light sound field or each density manifestation field is fueled by a single triad of the monad. You can also say, in a sense, that the way that it works is that the ECA functions like a Particai for us and splits itself into Particum and Particay, so that the entire ECA-VECA system is like a single triad at a different level, a bigger one. And that if you're considering that, like this as one single enormous triad, one way to look at that is that its phasing cycle, its rate of phasing, its like time cycle, is going to be much longer or bigger than anything that happens inside. It's like we have lots and lots and lots of time cycles that would happen for one phasing of the ECA-VECA system, building up lots and lots of energy for manifestation before you get one round of the full ECA-VECA. Okay, and this is the Christiak formula for eternal life. So the way that the monad functions is there's 360 degrees of energy potential or thrust that splits itself into 4 quadrants of 90 degrees each. And in the VECA, there's the Particum density field, the Particum primal field, Particay primal field, and the Particay density field. And here's the rayon field, the Miage, and actually this is the Miage, and this is the Trion. And this right here is the Dimension 12 Divine Blueprint Shield. So this is, in a sense, the relative size of the Dimension 12 Divine Blueprint in relative size to the phasing monad that creates it. It's really tiny with regard to that. We're going to see that again when we look at the ECA-VECA clock. So each one of these, that is 90, splits itself into 45, and then another 45 that breaks itself down into 33 1/3 and 11 2/3. And it's the phasing action that creates the eternal life formula. This is the form that our monad monad takes here in the particle universe. So here it is right here. It is based on a Kristalla Pythagora grid, and it has two triads in it. This one up here is for the manifestation fields, and this one down here is for the primal fields. So they're in the opposite place that you might expect. And you can see just from looking at this that basically what we have in the particle universe is half of a Vecca monad. So that sometimes when we're looking at the form that a monad takes, it could be the entire full 4-quadrant monad, or it might be half, or we might be talking about a monad that has the form of a quarter, that is a single triad. So we see the monad in all of those different forms in different places. The Party-K universe has the one that is exactly opposite to this, so it's going to have its Kristalla on this axis, and it's going to have its two triads also on the opposite axis. So together they all form a single Vecca monad. And this just shows the manifestation template and the primal light and sound template that goes to a single particle universe monad. And then the next one shows the way that the energy actually flows is from the Party-K primal field into the Party-Com density field.
Karen, I think it's great that you changed tapes.
So another name for the monadic body is the crystal body. It's the core morphogenetic field, and Cathara 2-3 anatomy is entirely basically about crystal body anatomy at the levels of the Vecca and the Eka. So the names for the crystal body forms are the Particum crystal bodies. This is basically the name for the Particum monad, is the low T. The Party-K crystal body is the low Ti. Together, Vecca monad crystal body, the low Tum. The Eka crystal body itself is the low Ta, and the entire Eka Vecca full crystal body is the low Te. And these are the forms of the crystal body light grids. This is the Particum low T light grids. This is for the Vecca lotum, and this is for the Eka lota. So this one is actually bigger than either of these relatively. And this is what the crystal body looks like when it's got its capstones on it. The capstones are vortices of energy that connect into the next level up and bring those higher level energies into the crystal body. The low T and the low Ti have 2 capstones each. So the Vecca has 4, the Eka has 4, and then the parallel Eka, brand new concept, also has 4, for a total of 12 in what's called the chariot of fire. So there's a lot of discussion of the chariot of fire and activating that in Cathara 2-3. Now the capstones are important because they correspond to the ascended mastery levels of consciousness. And the way that it works is that when consciousness enters a time matrix for the first time, its scalar grids and its consciousness are fragmented into many small pieces, and it is fully subject to the time cycles of the time matrix. So essentially, in that condition, a being has to reassemble itself piece by piece and walk through every single time cycle, every single incarnation, which can take billions of years to do that. After the first ascension out of the time matrix, it acquires these capstone codes. They're connect to the vortices that bring energy from the ascended levels of mastery into the time matrix. And re-entering the time matrix, that being has those codes that remain in its template that can be activated. And when you activate those codes, even when you're in a time matrix for a second, third, or millionth time, you can become free from the restrictions of time cycles and dimensionalization. So everyone who is indigo has done this first ascension out of a time matrix and has some level of capstone codes. Just reminding you a little bit of the way that the vortex fields work with regard to what we're going to talk about. This is the monad that for us spins counterclockwise. It creates what's called a vortex actual field that spins the opposite direction. This is the dimension 12 divine blueprint. Then there's a virtual field that spins the same way as the central one, and a deflection field that spins the opposite way again. So in a sense, this is just another way to look at the form of the monad. That here are the four monads of the Becca. And in this particular diagram, the dimension 12 blueprint is kind of pulled out of it and enlarged, so you can take a look at it. And then for the light field, it's going to be the dimension 14 blueprint. So the D13 monad spin, can you move that over so people can see the left-hand side? But the D13 spin, and then the dimension 12 blueprint is set as an opposite field from that one. Then the dimension 12 sets the dimension 11, which is the first Ruel dimension. These are all the control dimensions for each one of the Huva bodies. And it sets the way that that shield spins, the way that its rod spins, and the way that it's what's called its parameter field rotates. And that same pattern holds for all of the four densities. So the Gruel spins are the same as the monad spins. It's the opposite for the light fields. The way the light fields work is there's a dimension 13 replica that's created, and then the dimension 14 one is opposite from that. So that the densities and the light fields work the opposite ways with regard to the spins. The ecosphere spins counterclockwise, and the Veccosphere spins clockwise inside of that. And inside of that are these four monadic spheres, and then inside of those are the dimension 12 blueprints. So we've got a whole set of spheres that are all rotating opposite directions to each other. The way that the echo works is that it's vertical and it's horizontal. Both rotate clockwise. So it's got male rotations and it's constantly transmitting energy outward. The Vecca is the opposite. It's always rotating counterclockwise and receiving energy. And just to remind you of the time cycles, that the ECA has 6 time cycles of 6 expansions each, cycling out from the center, and each one of those is larger than the previous one. And then there's 2 leap cycles following that 6 cycles of 6, which creates the 8 octaves, which goes with the 8 of the monad. The time cycles of the particum and the particate densities are intertwined with each other. And if consciousness hasn't fully assembled all the frequencies of any particular time cycle, it will have to redo that time cycle. It drops down a whole level and has to do it all over again. So here we've got the pattern of the ruche, which is the same pattern of the monad. We've got the 4 in the center and then the 8 on the outside. The ones on the outside are called the octaves, and the ones on the inside are called the harmonics. The harmonics are the inner pillars, and those are the energies that run the time cycles of the individual dimensions. And the octaves are related to the larger time cycles of the Eka and the Veka. So the way that it works for our universe is that the octave shield is vertical and the harmonic shields are horizontal. So they rotate this way, and the octave shield for the big time cycle goes this way. So that actually corresponds to the Rishik shield. I think I want to skip. Can you go straight to the crystal dream seed? It's like a copy ahead. Now the location of our monad in our body is at the very center at the azure. And what we've got here is a diagram that shows the Cathara centers for the Cathara grids for each of the dimensions and densities going out. Every single dimension and every single density has a Cathara grid that each Cathara grid gets larger and larger, but every single Cathara grid has its center point right at the azure, and that is one of the primary locations of the monad. So all the monads link directly into each other through this central azure point, and it forms a direct line of monadic frequency and connection into the Amaraya central flame right through the central point of every single Cathara grid. Now the crystal dream seed, you should be really familiar with this diagram by now, because this is basically the dimension 13 monad and the dimension 12 divine blueprint. This is the top of the Cathara grid. This is called the crystal dream seed, and it is a direct connection to the monad. It is the point where the dimension 12 divine blueprint is perpetually resupplied because it exists right at the fission fusion point of that triad. So that as through the breathing, these cycle towards each other, it creates the sparks right at this point, and that keeps the divine 12, the divine blueprint dimension 12, perpetually resupplied for manifestation. In the physical body, this is the dimension 2 level. That is located in the adrenic triangulation in the brain, just a little in front of and below the pineal gland. Actually, go back to So if this isn't connected and operating in the body, then we're cut off from the echo level. And this controls current flows to the rest of the body. The dream seed in the body is like a tiny crystal seal, so it functions just like the rest of the crystal seals in the body. And like the crystal seals that are in the center of the chakras, and also in between the chakras, it opens current flows into the body. So when those seals open, the chakras can open into each other, and the entire central vertical current can open up to be the big eros seal, the entire flame. So that's when you get the full flame body activation. Now, the way that kind of communication works with regard to the time cycle is that with the harmonics, we've got the shields for the densities that rotate this way. They rotate horizontal. And just like the Cathara grid has the vertical staff, then it's got the horizontal rod. When those shields rotate, the rod spins around with the shield rotation. It's like the sweep hand of a clock. And as that rod spins around, it picks up the energies of the time cycles and then sends them up the staff straight to that point where they can flow back. So do people remember the transduction sequence? Okay. The way it's supposed to be is that there is a direct, the point of now is called the eros point. And there is a flow down through the transduction sequence and into this level of our body, but there's a corresponding backflow that flows all the way back up to source. So this is one of the important ways that that happens. And it's like at this point right here, source can always tell exactly what's happening in these manifestation fields by feeling what kind of spark is being sent back. So you can think of it as source can always tell exactly where you are in your time cycle and where you are in your manifestation cycle, what density you're at, how much energy you have accumulated into your template by feeling the power of that spark coming back up. And the way that the time cycles work is that it's called frequency accretion, but you're not only picking up energy to fill out your template, but you're picking up sparking power at the same time. Because when you go up into the Eka, the level of the spark that's run is much bigger. So you kind of assemble that spark in tiny, tiny little pieces as you go through each time cycle. And because when you get to the point where you're going to inhabit that larger body, you need to not only have filled out the lower template, but you have to have pulled into your system enough charge that when you go up a level, you can run that higher current. So you pull that current together really slowly, going through the time cycles. All right, now we're going to talk about monadic reversal. This is essentially that monadic connection point. It's just a different pictorial way of looking at the dimension 12 and the dimension 13 fission fusion point there. And this is actually supposed to be rotated vertically. This is what happens in monadic reversal, is that the staff gets broken. So cosmic order is designed to be a self-balancing system and a self-sustaining system. It's supposed to have perpetual motion and eternal life. But because Source has free will and has given everything in the time matrix free will as well, because we're all created in the pattern of source. There is the ability up to a certain point to make choices that would actually compromise that. So free will choice is allowed up to the point at which the original intention could be compromised. You can call it co-creation when choices are made that are in harmony with that original intention. And you can then consider that it's like us as the manifest aspects of source and the de-manifest aspects of source are working together in a harmonious way to create a reality system. What happens is that every time a choice is made that opposes the original intention, it actually affects the energy in the structure. And the way the shields are created is they're made up of thousands of units of energy receivers called aparthi that are little units of consciousness. And the aparthi themselves get reversed when a non-Christiac choice is made. When that happens, the polarity is reversed and it actually blocks the flow, the natural flow of the primal life force currents. Because the template is a hologram and all parts of the template have the pattern for the whole thing, you can sustain a certain amount of damage, and the parts that are around it can fix it and override it if you get enough energy in, and there's the possibility of flipping those back around. It's like the entire consciousness and the pattern for the whole thing is held by every single part. So you can easily remember how to redo those parts that are damaged and reversed. But if you get to a critical mass point, you can't do that anymore. It's like there's not enough of the original image or template left to have it reconstructed. And the way that the staff works is that I think we tend to think of these structures as like really kind of rigid, crystalline, geometrical kinds of things, but they're actually not necessarily. And that it's the flow of currents down and back up the staff that actually maintains the integrity of the staff and keeps it straight and keeps it vertical and keeps it really flowing. So that when you get enough aparthi that are reversed and pushing back on the incoming flow, what happens is that the staff starts to stretch and bend out of shape. It gets like floppy, and you can't maintain that sparking connection anymore. You can sustain a certain amount of stretch and still be able to get back to vertical, but once you get past a certain point, you actually break the template and you break the staff and you break off part of the Dimension 12 blueprint that stays up there. And then the rest of it can't be any larger than 11 and a half dimensions, which is a pretty familiar number for us in terms of the original fall. And what happens when you break that is that you don't get normal function of the electrical Merkaba anymore because you can't bring in any more new currents. The seed atom, the center of the seed atom closes, so there can't be any more in and outgoing flow. And whatever amount of energy is left in that template is all that's left to that manifestation. So it will continue to expend the energy that's in it out into manifestation for a certain time, but the magnetic spiral is going to continue to get stronger and stronger because it doesn't have any way to flow out. It can't flow out through the seed atom anymore back into source. So that manifestation is going to get more and more and more magnetic. It starts to collapse and get really dense and pull in on itself until you get a condition called molecular compaction. Once you get that condition and you've expended all the energy, the entire thing implodes in on itself and the particum and the partic units that are in the seed atom, in that monad, annihilate each other and instigate a chain reaction that blows the entire thing up into particle units. At that point in time, those particle don't have any memory of the previous manifestation. The memory is maintained through that transduction sequence where you get the flow from source down through, and every time the energy flows back up, every time the particum and the partic rejoin to form the partic, what happens is that the template of that original partic is the same template, but the consciousness in it is expanded. So that's how the memory is maintained. With every single phasing, what happened in that flash off point gets pulled back, in the flash on point gets pulled back and it's retained. So it's like the particle gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it remembers everything that happened into that manifestation. But it can only remember that up to the point at which that Merkaba staff breaks. So it's like once you get the point of monadic reversal, source can't feel you anymore, and it can't know what you're doing in that universe past that point. And when all the units in that manifestation go back to particle units, their memory is destroyed. And it's basically primal units of consciousness that don't have any memory of what happened before. I would go ahead and read this. It's so important. The cosmic Christos seed atom and the corresponding cosmic Merkaba field spirals are designed to function in perfect balance eternally, ensuring that the eternal life creation framework itself remains intact and perpetually self-sustaining. The characteristic of apparent vulnerability of the smaller universal Merkabic circulatory system and the counterbalance of the divine invincibility of the cosmic Merkabic circulatory system was intentionally created by God Source as an intrinsic aspect of the cosmic Christ divine blueprint and Christos seed atom, as the means by which the paradox of free will could be successfully managed within the original divine intention of eternal life, perpetual motion, Christiac creation. Now the big question is, exactly where is that dividing line between cosmic and universal? It's pretty clear that anything that is universal and smaller has the capacity to fall, and that the cosmic structures are eternally held and are permanent. They cannot ever fall. And I don't know where that line is. I used to think that it was at maybe the top of a time matrix and that the echo could fall, but I think we now know that that is not true, so I do not know at this point exactly where that line is. You can get monadic reversal of a universe, but you can also get it with a planet, with a being, or even something that is small as an atom or a set of molecules, which is kind of a strange thing to think of, but it can happen. Okay. This is lotus breathing, which is also called monadic breathing. So you can now know that every time you're doing lotus breathing, you're breathing the monad. This is the 6-petal lotus flow of the particum monad. The partic monad also has 6 petals. The eka lota has 6 petals. And the full eka veka lote has 24. So when you're doing 12 and 24 and then 48 petals, you know what you're doing. The 48 petals open the full eka and the parallel eka. would like you to skip to this is the monadic heliopathy technique, and this is using lotus breathing and intention to spin the parameter field, which is the vertical shield, which is the Rijksjack shield, which goes with the monad, of the core dimension 13 monad, and of the dimension 2 Gruel monad, spinning that in the correct direction. Females spin that counterclockwise, and males spin that clockwise. And the reason for that, we didn't know even 100% fully until we had the information about the parallel eka, but males and females have different current flows because we have different kinds of connections through the eka and the parallel eka to the monads and the seed atoms.
Can you just say that one more time, that last sentence? Why different spins for males and females?
We're going to see a little bit more about that a couple slides down, so I think you'll get it then. This is the Yonesa 15-cell seed atom, and this is the seed atom that is located in the Akasha base shield. This has 15 cells in it that correspond to 15 radial bodies, 15 sets of consciousnesses, and the universal or Veka level of the seed atom was reset for us beginning in Kitharo and then Kitharon 2003. So the outer cells, these big ones on the outside, are the electrical cells. They were anchored in the Trion field, and then the inner 8 magnetic ones were anchored in the Miage fields. The full activation of that is scheduled to complete in 2012 with activation in the Rayon field of the radial bodies. We're just really zooming through, looking at a few different things. This is the matrodon. This is the seed atom of the eka. And again, when you look at this, you can see how similar this form is, the seed atom form, to the full Eka-Veka system. And the reason for that is that this is the core template for it, and when it is fully fleshed out into manifestation, by going through all of its time cycles, it becomes the full Eka-Veka. So it's like, you could say the matrodon is like, the cells of a human being at conception that becomes the fully manifested form by going through the accretion process, the frequency drawing in process of the time cycles. And these are the 8 cells of the matrodon. Our seed atom is derived from the inner 8 magnetic cells of the Yonesa seed atom. The parallel eka has the electrical cells of the seed atom. So here are the 8 cells of the matrodon. There's one big one that corresponds to the entire eka blueprint. There are 2 electrical phasing cells, 2 magnetic phasing sound cells. There's another eka 12.5 level, and then there's 2 spheres in the center here that represent the partitone and the particate crystal body structures. So if you look at these, you can see that we've got the 8 cells, but they're just arranged really differently in both of these forms. Now, we in our eka have the matrodon as our seed atom. This is a female seed atom. It's from the inner female magnetic cells of the Akasha seed atom, one level up. But our flame for our Eka is a male flame. It's the Lut Ettore flame. So our Eka is actually considered a male Eka because of the male flame. The parallel Eka has, its seed atom is called the Petrodon. So it is a male seed atom, but the flame for the parallel Eka is called the Lut Ettore. It is a female flame. So that is a female Eka. So we've got that same pattern again where on one level, if you're looking at the Eka, you could see it like as a Partakai equivalent, like a Manu force. But when we're looking at it this way, they break down into male and female. So it just depends on what perspective you're looking at them from, whether they look like they're Partakai or male or female. And then we're just going to look really briefly at the way the flames step down. You can also say that while there is 360 degrees of energy in every single one of these layers, they're not the same 360 degrees. That is, this 360 is a lot smaller than that 360. So even though they have the same amount of charge and they take the position of the 360 for that level of manifestation, it gets smaller and smaller and steps down. So it starts with, at the top, it is the Adondra 360 flame. That breaks itself down into an Iane Ettore seed flame and an Adane Adore seed flame that then recombine, and we have the Androdon Akasha seed atom that has its 360 flame. This is the Adondrea. So we have the Adondra, the Adondrea. This is the Akasha. And the Akasha forms then another 360 that splits into 490s. The flames for our Eka, here's our Eka flame, a 45 Lut Ettore charge, and a parallel Eka, 45 Lut Ettore charge. There are 3 more quadrants to that Akasha that we've never even talked about. So we just recently started integrating the information about the parallel Eka. But there are 6 more Ekas that belong to the Akasha. And I have no idea if we're going to really have to know about them or not, but we might. And this is where you really start to get the flames splitting themselves down into the 11 and 2/3, 33 and a third part. So this is at the level of the Veka, and then we get down into the density levels. So when we're in the Son of Lyra saying Shaddai Ur, we've got a Shaddai flame, and then we also have a Shaddam flame. So because we're in the Partakam universe, we have a male Shaddai, pillar of light. And the Partake universe is a female Shaddam, pillar of light. Okay. Is this a whirlwind? Okay. Now I just wanted to do another slide that is kind of like a little bit of a technique highlight. And I think you can kind of see that we've sort of been increasingly accelerated in terms of our focus on monad over the years. So flame body activation, because it connects with that radial body and with the monadic levels, is really when we really started to get into what I'm going to call techniques that relate specifically to the monad. And then Kitharam and Kithalan are the reset of the universal crystal seed atom, both in our Veka and in our bodies. The ECA monadic template master key code is what helps us really begin to reconnect into the time cycles of the ECA. And then with the lotus breathing techniques, we're connecting into all the different levels of that crystal body. The particle universe, the Veka, the ECA, the parallel ECA. There's a crystal dream seed meditation, which is not really a well-known one, but it's really a beautiful technique. The monadic heliopathy, so that we can spin our monadic shields in the correct direction, so that we have the possibility of running those currents in the body and then actually connecting with the ECA time cycles in the body. And then everything that's in Kathara 2 and 3 are techniques for crystal body activation, focusing on the pillar of power and so forth. And then the Rushate reset cycle has also turned into a starburst cycle, which is a monadic reset that anchors in the Akasha A level. And then we've got the starburst breaths, which you could say are really powerful monadic level breaths. Okay, so at this point we've got a choice. We can, if you like, do a technique of anchoring the monad, or if people have a lot of questions, we could also do questions instead. What I'm thinking is, with regard to this technique, it is one of the real early techniques and focuses on getting the template for that 8th dimension really clear and solid in our bodies. And that 8th dimension is a really crucial dimension. So I was thinking that even though we're doing these super high level activations these days, that we have to have a nice solid 8th dimensional template to have all that run through, or it's going to be just kind of hanging out in our fields and not really fully activated. So we could do that, but if people are saying, help, I don't know what you were talking about, we can also do that. And here's what I'm going to suggest. Can you pull out the slide that had that big golden source sphere that was early on? Yeah. This is a technique from Tangible Structure of the Soul. And it is suggested in this that when you're doing it, that you are looking at the sun. Since we're not going to be looking at the sun, I'm going to suggest 2 things. We are the sun, but we're going to do something that I think could be even better. Yes. So just remember, because we're going to put up another slide, that the zip symbol is the double forward slanting lightning bolts. And my suggestion is going to be that when we're done with this and you go outside, you can spend a minute or 2 in the sun and get your solar infusion then. But let's also kind of add an additional dimension to this technique of, you can look at this and imagine intend that it's as if we're looking at the sun, right through the sun, through that central sun of the Eka, all the way to the central source of everything, through the Unisian into source. So it's like all the suns are exactly lined up through their centers, and as we look into the sun, we're going all the way back to the central point of creation. Okay? All right. Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to point out, I noticed maybe if you could call the other sheet again with a forward slanting zip. But it may be wrong. I think it goes up.
It doesn't forward slant. It seems backwards to me too, but.
This is the way it is in Tangible Structure.
So it's, you picture it going down.
Down to the right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wait, go ahead and put it on top of it. How'd you like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, anchoring the source on that. That lines up really nicely. Okay.
Last in March. She later.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody ready? Go ahead and, let's see. There's one additional symbol that we're going to use, but I figured that everybody knows exactly what a white mark of a star looks like, so we didn't need to have that up there. So we're going to start by everybody taking 3 slow, deep breaths. And clearly visualize that zip symbol in a pale gold color, surrounded by a white mark of a star, positioned at the forehead between the brows of the 6th chakra. And imagine this symbol filling with light and energy as you inhale the 4th breath. Now you can open your eyes and look at the sun. Exhale the symbol and push it towards the sun. And intend that it enters the sun and picks up its light frequency spectrum. And take a few relaxed breaths as you visualize and imagine that that symbol is absorbing solar frequencies until you feel it reach a stopping sensation. The symbol is full. Now, inhale slowly, drawing this loaded symbol back towards you, and imagine that it has replicated into 2 as it's coming towards you, moving on 2 separate rays of light, and at the completion of the inhale, 1 symbol comes to rest in the thyroid gland at the 8th chakra, and 1 just above the forehead at the 6th chakra. Exhale and take a few relaxed breaths. Now on the next inhale, nice long, slow inhale, visualize the 2 symbols entering the body, 1 at the brow, 1 into the thyroid gland. And on the exhale, move the one that is at the pineal gland to the thyroid. Now inhale at the thyroid. The 2 symbols remerge into 1 and move the single symbol down to the navel. With the exhale, inhale, move the symbol down to the 2nd Kathara sphere behind the genitals. Inhale, divide the symbol into 2 and send 1 down the inside of each leg. With the exhale, have them remerge in the 12th Kathara point, and then continue all the way to chakra 13 at Earth's core. Now we're going to take 7 breaths in Earth's core and allow the symbol to absorb the frequencies in the 13th chakra. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale, 6. Last inhale. Last exhale. Now inhale the symbol back up through the 12th chakra into the first chakra and then into the second Kathara sphere. Exhale. Inhale up into the 5th Kathara sphere behind the navel. Exhale. Inhale up through the 8th chakra at the thyroid into the thyroid gland and exhale. And just take a few relaxed breaths there. Now inhale the symbol up to the 11th Kathara sphere in the pineal and exhale. Now we're going to take 3 slow, deep breaths. Inhale, hold for 3. Exhale, hold for 3. Inhale, hold for 3. Exhale, hold for 3. Inhale, hold for 3. Exhale, hold for 3. On your next inhale, see the breath filling the symbol with pale gold light. And then exhale forcefully and see the symbol bursting out around your head on a horizontal plane, surrounding the head like a halo. Inhale, drawing power from the sun to energize the symbol. Exhale and push energy from the pineal outward into the halo. And see the halo begin to glow with pale gold light. Inhale into the pineal again. Exhale forcefully into the halo and see it replicate, now forming a double halo around your head. And observe as the 2 halos begin to spin in opposite directions, one towards the left and one towards the right. And watch as these spin faster and faster and faster, until you either feel a sensation of tiredness or you lose track of the spinning. This spinning draws 8th dimensional frequency into your morphogenetic field, which we will then use to spark the Orion shield in the thyroid gland. Now inhale slowly, pulling the halos back into the pineal gland as a tiny spark of pale gold light. Exhale this spark to the thyroid. Inhale at the thyroid and exhale forcefully into the thyroid and see the spark exploding, filling the thyroid gland with pale gold energy light. Now just breathe gently and see this pale gold light grow brighter and brighter. And notice that in this pale gold light, you can see a tiny crystal sphere in the center of the thyroid. This sphere is the spark of the living flame, the shield of Orion. It connects you to your original stream and seed of consciousness in the body of Source. This transparent sphere is now activated. It represents the part of your identity that has never left its station of at one with God. And then you can just open your eyes. And remember, when you go outside, you can just take a minute and get a little sunlight going in through your eyes so you get that fully activated for yourself physically.